So I felt that, given the activities in America over the weekend, it would probably be best to clarify my thoughts on this, considering the videos I've posted thus far are somewhat prescient. The events of the past few days are not going to go away, nor are they sudden. These are quite clearly the build-up of what's been going on for the past decade. These are the inevitable results of any diverse nation. Rome built its strength when it was Romans, because there was a coherent idea of the nation of Rome itself. And everyone had it in their own self-interest that they fight for Rome. Now we find ourselves in the position of later years Rome, post-Christ Rome. Here Rome has, in an effort to improve its own wealth, inducted other people, under the assumption that those people could be utterly interchangeable with Romans. The result of this was that, yes indeed, there were short-term gains, because you simply had more people and more land, and those people could work the land. But people are not interchangeable. So, what is the goal? Because before one can even talk about what the best method is, one must first define what it is you're trying to achieve. Are we attempting to achieve GDP? Why on earth does anyone care about GDP? Well, high GDPs, per capita, tend to lead to a higher quality of life. So the GDP only matters insofar as it serves the quality of life of the people in the society that GDP applies to. Mass immigration and diversity do not serve the interests of any people, not the immigrants in the long term. Yes, there are short-term gains for the immigrants. Not the people who live in the country. There are short-term gains. Boomers, for example, will probably support immigration for the simple fact that they own homes. And if you own a home, well, then those immigrants are demanding land that you possess. So all that you see is the value of your house goes up. But that house is no longer in the community it used to be in. The situation is deteriorating the world over. There are protests in London and in Berlin regarding police brutality in the United States. Those protests have as little to do with police brutality as the riots in America do. First of all, the riot is, for anyone who has actually seen uncommentaried footage of what's happening on the ground, are solely about the material enrichment of the people committing the crimes. They don't have a political stance on this. They simply realize that there's now enough people that they will suffer no consequences for any crimes they commit. Because if 2,000 people are rioting, they're not going to send investigators after all 2,000 people. Especially when you have the cover story that is police brutality and all of these things. How many members of the American Congress have thus far decided to march with the people burning down buildings, assaulting old women? Situations like these are no longer avoidable. They're going to happen. But we should at least be looking for reasonable courses of action. These things will happen. The decisions that led to these were all made in the 1960s and the 1970s. We are suffering from the sins of our fathers. What then would be a reasonable course of action? We could all say race war now. We could say Civil War II electric boogaloo for every country in the West. Issues arise at various levels, but solutions should always look for the deepest level, because then all those issues which depend upon it can be dealt with. In this case, what the central problem is that you are attempting to have diverse groups live under the same rules. If they exist within the same structure, they don't fight for the structure, unless all of them are going to die. They fight over the structure. America, the West in general, has no credible outside threat. The People's Liberation Army of China is a laughingstock. It has no combat experience. Most of the troops that it has don't know how to fight. They've been trained in propaganda, marching around drill squares, which in an age of mechanized warfare is irrelevant. So America doesn't have an existential threat. What everyone's been doing for the past couple of decades is fighting over who gets control of this all-powerful state. Australia has one advantage: sheer bloody size. This country that I am in has the advantage that Perth is almost independent of the East Coast. And then the East Coast is balanced between the powers of Sydney and Melbourne. We also only have about 25 million people. My country will be facing these problems in about 10 years. I would prefer a peaceful solution, which goes back to my previous video. Balkanization would be better, because these conflicts will continue to happen so long as we attempt to force people who do not want to be together to live together. Diversity only provides short-term gains for those in power, because over the short term they're able to cram in more people into the system to produce value. It always tears apart the system in question, though, but they can cash out and go to the Bahamas. For those of us who are forced to live in our countries, for those of us who actually want our communities to be safe, a better way of dealing with this would be talking through how we are going to divvy up the current situation. Prior to this weekend, we were considering how we would deal with the Hong Kong problem. China is moving in to remove Hong Kong. The CCP wishes to erase the people of Hong Kong, who are Cantonese, because the Han Mandarin CCP does not like anyone challenging its power. Prior to this weekend, I was already saying that it would be a bad idea to simply export everyone from Hong Kong, because then the CCP wins. What that teaches everyone in the world is that if you threaten a minority, we will simply remove that minority from the game, so you effectively win, because the CCP gets Hong Kong. And then we have to look after all these people, which weakens us, so we are no longer able to resist as well those powers which encroach. The PLA is a laughingstock now. If, however, we are burdened and divided by having to take in every single group which encounters oppression in the world, one day we will not be in a position where we are able to resist. The PLA does not need to become stronger. They only need for us to become weaker. And if we continue upon this course, motivated by nothing more than a desire to be nice, that is, to say things that we think will make people like us, they will get what they want. I put forward that we should not be nice. I instead put forward that we should be good, which is doing what should be done in order to ensure the highest happiness across the longest period of time, even if it means people don't like you. Telling your friend to start exercising, stop eating so much, stop drinking so much, is not nice. It is not something that they will enjoy. But it is the right thing to do. What we should be doing is negotiating a peaceful separation. Because the last few days have made it clear that the alternative is not that we all magically come together. That is not an option. It does not happen in reality. The alternative is instead, we all get to make our Facebook posts about how we should all just come together, magically put aside our differences, which is code for don't actually fix them, and then our children have to deal with this. The last generation did not deal with this because they were able to reap the benefits of this. Now we, in the ashes of the last few days, must ask the question, do we do the same thing because we can still squeeze out some short-term benefits at the expense of our children?